But yeah. So what I like to do is find out, how people got started in this crazy world of filmmaking. It's one of those jobs that not a lot of people succeed at or stick through. So you grew up in Europe. So you're from Norway, or is that where you grew up?
Well, yes, I was born in Holland. So my family is half of my family is Dutch, and then we moved to Norway when I was really young. And I'm from a small town called Fredrikstad. And it's so small that when I walk down to the local store, the toy store, and I told them, there's a movie called Star Wars, and they have these really amazing toys. The guy at that toy store, he was so into model trains, he just laughed at me and said, God, nobody will ever buy those things. And boy, was he wrong. I mean, they're so out of business now, but it was just one of those things. When a kid comes and asks about a certain toy, you should go, oh, well, that's interesting. Maybe I should try to look into that instead of, making you feel like an idiot. It just speaks a little bit to, and I don't want to, sit here and bash my own country, but there is a sense of, there's a famous story about a grocery store owner in Norway who was asked. So a tourist comes in and says, "Do you guys have bananas?" And then he goes, "You know what? They just get sold out all the time. So I've stopped taking them in." and that's sort of a little bit of a metaphor for how, if you have a success, that's not really a great thing. And my wife and I, we sometimes says we're refugees here to this country, and we're cultural refugees because we made movies that are successful, but then, well, that's not, you're not supposed to be successful. You can't get funding again, or it's a little bit, so there's a little bit of a contradiction, to put it mildly.
Yeah. So, you mentioned Star Wars. Was that like an early, was there movies all the time there? Like when you were growing up, did like all the big blockbusters come through?
Well, they usually came months or a year after the rest of the country. So my the first indication I had that there was a big movie coming was Mad Magazine. And
Nice.
And I loved Mad Magazine. It was the one little window I had into the States. And I've always sort of loved America. I've loved American movies. I've loved American television. I just loved everything America. And the Norwegian Broadcasting Company, for some reason, had an inkling to look more east. They had a lot of Czech animation, and there was a lot of Eastern European influence. So luckily, where I lived in Fredrikstad, we also got a little bit of Swedish television because that came through the ether. And there we got a little more of a window into America. But Mad Magazine was my sort of window. And I remember reading Star Wars as a parody before the movie came out. So I was like, oh, this looks amazing. And then Star Wars came, and it was shown at our theater. And I think I just saw it 3-4 times in a row. I wanted to go in with a recorder and record. I was drawing schematics to myself how I could throw the microphone over the edge because I knew where the microphone, because I wanted that music. I had no access to either toys or music or nothing, and it just blew me away. But at that time I had already made movies since I was 8. Actually, this wasn't planned, by the way, but I just coincidentally, because we're making an animation movie back there.
Nice.
And there was this. I just sort of had to prove that I've done animation, and I came across this article. This was the first. Oh, my camera is glowing. This was the first article that was the first article made about me when I was 12.
Oh my God!
And it says it says a 12-year-old boy with 5 years movie experience. So by the time I was 12, I had already made tons of animations, and I learned walking cycles on. So that's how I started.
What was the influence? Who was it? Someone in your family, or neighbors,
No,
friends
I
like
had.
influenced you, or you just at the age of 7, you're like, I want to make movies?
Yeah, I was. I guess it was the Disney influence, and funny enough, again, we had only Eastern European animations on television back there, but for Christmas they showed Disney animations, and it was just incredible. Jimmy Cricket. Later, I realized that was actually something they almost got for free because it was Jimmy Cricket presenting new movies. It was actually trailers, so they didn't pay anything for that. But that was for us. That was Disney Christmas Eve. I was hooked. So that's how I started.
Do you still have one of those camera, like that camera, or another camera, like a replica of it? That'd be cool to
Yeah,
have.
no, I don't have. Yeah, I don't have that camera. I've actually my daughter is now really interested in movies. She's applying for college, and
Nice.
I bought her a Super 8 Bolio.
Cool.
So she and a light meter, and so she's now almost 18, but she's been doing it for many years now with Super 8, which I think is a fantastic medium to start with because it's film. It has to be exposed. It's expensive, so you have to rehearse and make sure you shoot
Yeah.
the right thing. There's a lot of nostalgia and really good learning in Super 8.
Do you miss it at all? Like, would you, if you had the choice? Obviously, it's really expensive, but is there something that is different when you're shooting? I think you sort of like said it, like it matters what you shoot because of the cost of the film. Do you think shooting digitally, you're like, let's just try this different take, or let's do like, do you see people doing that more?
I can't speak for other people too much, but of course, the digital world has been amazing to filmmakers. There's no denying it. And I remember after the last movie I shot on film was Mortal Instruments, and my amazing DP Guide and we were about to do the transfer. We were debating whether we should do the next one digital. And we did like a 3-day testing. We tested everything we could, same lenses, same moves, same lighting situations, rain, fog, everything. And we just sat there in the theater looking at each other. It's like, it's really hard to tell the difference nowadays, with the new areas.
Yeah.
So we kind of caved. But I think there was a discipline. But I've sort of just maintained that discipline of rehearsals and planning and just be a little more, I don't know, structured. But there's also a sense of filmmaking that where people shoot a lot of loose stuff and they get amazing stuff, which I'm sometimes jealous of. I wish I could somehow break loose a little bit. It's like playing jazz. I wish I knew how to play jazz. I can play classical piano, and I'm a little sort of conform in that sense. But then I see other directors just get crazy stuff done, and you sometimes if I'm lucky enough to speak to them, I was like, how'd you do that? And they're like, it was totally by accident, So I wish I was a little more like that.
No, you're right. The old film thing, like Canon films in the 80s, that's all they did was like their movies would never be over 90 minutes because they accounted for how much film that had to be bought. And they would like, it's so funny. If you look at their catalog, it's all like an hour 29, hour 28, hour 20, because they factored in, hey, if we have to get like that next roll of film, it's going to cost us X amount of dollars for like the extra stuff that needs to be shot.
Yeah, I think it's two more things than that too. It's also your prints had to be a certain number of rolls, but it's also the time slots. People don't know this anymore either, but it was like the 7 o'clock show, 9 o'clock show, 11. And if your movie was more than 2 hours, you couldn't fit into those slots.
That's true.
So that was a part of the issue too, I think. But I remember Canon. I remember that logo like it was yesterday. I was in the film school in Amsterdam, where I went to the film academy in Amsterdam, and we had free cards. We could go to see the movies as much as we wanted. And there's a great, Amsterdam has a lot of great movie theaters. And I just walked into one after the other. There's one Canon movie after another. I remember the 80s was amazing that way. Yeah. And then I remember,
made a lot of movies.
I remember yeah, bad and good. And it was just everything.
Oh yeah.
And I remember the, Amadeus was the best movie I'd seen in a long time, except Aliens and a bunch of other great movies. But I remember Amadeus. I walked in, And then there was like a half hour before the next show. And then I ran into a Canon movie. So a half hour of that, and then I walked back in and saw Amadeus again. So I remember those Canon movies very well.
So is that like the bridging the gap from like 12 years old, you're still doing film, and then you're like, what's the next step? And then you went to a film school in Amsterdam?
Yeah. I had a, supportive dad, and my brother was already studying medicine in Amsterdam or in Holland. I had a Dutch family. I was thinking about going to London too, which I thought was fascinating. But the Dutch Film Academy is a really, really, really good school. They had Paul Verhoeven. My classmate of mine has made 2 Oscar movies. Our class are all working people, and I just remember it's a 4-year school, and it was about over 1,000 students, and they only let 18 students in every year. So it was like a really, really narrow gap. And it was a super educational, fantastic school. So, but before that, I had just done, films at home and just with friends and everything. So it was a natural step for me.
And then, so you graduate 4 years, you're learning the ins and outs of filmmaking. What's your first step after that? Did you have an idea of like, hey, my goal is features or TV? Did you have anything like?
Yeah, I had that since I was 8.
Yeah.
I was not in doubt at all. Since I was 8, I wanted to make movies. I think the big thing for me happened, my mom passed away when I was 12, and my dad was a very practical guy. And I remember he sold the house, and he said, okay, I'm moving there. He had a really good opportunity on the west coast of Norway, which was even further away from civilization than where I already lived. and he just sent me a ticket for a train and a bus. And I remember sitting on that bus thinking, this is the moment. Now I have no control of my life. I'm going to move somewhere where I've never been before, away from all my friends. And I thought, from now on, I will be in control of my life. Everything that happens from now on will happen because I want it to happen. And I remember that just gave me such a force. And since then it's sort of been like that. So I just decided, okay, film school, it takes a certain determination. And I was lucky enough. I did an exam film. My closing film that I graduated with was screened on all television channels in Norway. I went straight into commercials, which was great for me because I made money. And that's when I met my wife and now producer, Vesleme, who was a very entrepreneurial soul who, she was studying law and criminology, and she was starting to look at, the contracts I had for the people I was working with. She's like, Jesus, these guys are just exploiting you. They need you more than you need them. And then slowly she started renegotiating and getting more and more involved. And then she looked at the casting. So you can't have that guy. You should have that guy. And so she has really good taste. And she was kind of the only one who really could tell me something was shit. So, we've worked together now for, I don't know how many years. It's, we moved here 23 years ago. I think we worked almost 30 years together.
Wow.
And, so it's, you got to have a partner who's very entrepreneurial and talented and creative. And so I think she's a big part of the success for me.
Yeah. Now look at that. You find somebody that has a similar passion in something and looked out for you before you knew her. She was looking out for you. So you caught her eye right from the beginning that she was like, hey man, they're taking everything from you.
Yeah. No, I remember also I was just screening the exam film at a small film club in Norway, and she was out selling tickets, getting people to come in. Yeah. So it was, she was made for this. She just didn't know it at that point, I think. So
yeah. Was that Gabriel's Surprise? Cool. Was that your exam film that went around?
Yes.
Wow.
That's exactly right. Yeah. God, you knew that. That's a good research.
So is that something that is that like the last year of school, or how long did it take to make that? Yeah.
No, that was just last year. It was a tough school. We had to every year we had to do a project. our own film. If you were in directing, you had to direct the movie, obviously, and if you were in writing, you had to write it too. And then if you were in editing, you had to edit somebody else's movie. So every year we
cool.
did that. It was a really tough school. And then it was then you had to sit in front of a panel, and they looked at your work and they said, well, you know what? You're not making the progress we want you to make, so you have to leave. And so it was really tough. And I think we started with 16 directors, and we ended up with 8. The rest were kicked out along the way. And then because it was a state-funded school, so we had 16 mil and projections and development and actors, and it was all paid for by the school. So they really wanted students that were, I guess, at least focused or talented. And so that was the last year's film. It was Gabriel's Surprise. It was very inspired by Back to the Future, I have to say. Which I think to this day is one of the best movies ever made.
Yeah. It holds up. It's so cool when you watch movies that you haven't watched in a while, and you're like, wow, it still holds up. Like these movies are still as good as the first time your eyes look at them.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because again, the culture back home where I come from in Norway, it tends to be. I mean, now it's a little more kosher, but way back when I was young, to say that you liked American movies was not cool. You had to like French movies or Japanese art movies or some art movies. And I was having dinner with I was really young and all these filmmakers, and I said, well, I like Back to the Future. And they were like, what? How can you even say that? And then I came to America, because my wife and I were, because of the commercials, we were lucky enough to be invited by Steven Spielberg. He's the one who got us over here. So we had, it was really crazy. The show reel I had was in London, and then it ended up on the desk of ICM here in LA. And within a week, we had 3 agents and manager and everything, and they sent it out on town, and we had all these offers, and then Spielberg wanted to have lunch, which was just completely surreal, and and we did, and I remember I couldn't say much because I was so starstruck, but my wife was talking away, and she talked to him about private in prisons, which she had studied, so she had a lot to say, and the two of them were discussing, and then I said a few things, but I remember saying that one of my favorite movies were Back to the Future, and he obviously was involved in that, and he says really seriously, yeah, that is a really amazing movie. And then you sit with people like Will Smith or Michael Douglas, and then they say, yeah, that is a really, really good movie. And to me, that was just so amazing. These guys just shared this idea that, yeah, that is a good movie. It made a lot of money. It's really well told. It's got heart. So I just felt, I'm home.
Yeah, right? No, it's up there. That and Jaws. It's so funny so many movies that Spielberg's involved with are just so good. Like Jaws is to me, that's one of my favorite movies. I can watch that over and over again and sort of pick up something new. It's just such a great story. The characters are perfectly cast. You couldn't see anyone else in any of those roles.
I completely agree. And also I watched Close Encounter the other day, just because I wanted to remind myself. And sometimes he just, and people don't appreciate this enough with him, but the blocking, I think, is one of his strongest notions. The fact that he lets the camera roll and people walk past, and then they walk themselves in a close-up, and then they walk behind something because then he wants you to look at something else. It's just, and I remember in Jaws, there's this long tracking shot, and suddenly it's the car door that gets closed, and there's the answer to something they've been discussing. Just the way he tells everything with imagery and just the camera blocking, I think, is genius. I think people appreciate. I think
he has that. Yeah, he has that passion, like you did at a young age. He was doing Super 8 film, cutting film in his room, taping it together. I've interviewed a few people that worked with him. One was Joe Alves, who worked on Jaws. He was a production designer on Jaws, Close Encounters, and just hearing the stories about just the way he thinks. He just seems like he's always having so much fun on set. He's a character actor, Peter Jason, told me when they were on the set of Arachnophobia, like in between when they were taking a break, like the kid actors in a scene, like Spielberg's like running around with the kids and like just having fun. And like you see that in his films. Like there's the word that everybody wants in any film is heart. And you see that in every single different type of movie, whether it be a movie like he had his hands involved in, like Poltergeist, which is a horror movie, like a scary movie, or like you said, like a Back to the Future. There's always heart involved in his movies.
Yeah, it's amazing how he just gets his stamp on everything. I remember when we were discussing, I met him on another project later too, and it was he said, I made this movie once, and he mentions this title, and I think it was Inner Space, which he was involved with.
Oh yeah.
And it's so charming because he can, and this goes with a lot of people too, but they say, I made this movie, and it's as if you didn't see it. They don't want to assume that you already know what it is, and I'm like, Inner Space.
Yeah,
Christ, I remember that. That was amazing. You have no idea what your movies have done to me. So they're so humble, which is really charming.
Yeah. So after that, you're here, and I guess that's when you moved, like right after that, right about that.
Yeah,
point?
I mean, like I said, I have a very entrepreneurial, adventurous wife. She just said, let's do it. We just. What do you say when you stop renting your apartment? We just said, okay, we're not going to live here anymore. We packed 2 suitcases, and now we have a house in Rusty Canyon. We're 10 movies later, and we never looked back. Basically, it was amazing.
So the first movie that you directed was One Night at McCool's, like in the States.
Yeah, I did Commander Hamilton before that in Sweden, which was was a sort of secret agent type movie based on a very famous book in Sweden. But that was a 4-hour TV show that we then recut into a feature, and I did really well.
Nice.
But the ticket to get over here was the commercials, and the commercials were all comedy commercials. So I got signed on to a lot of comedy scripts, and then Michael Douglas, who's an amazing guy, I met him, and he had this really funny script, and we just got the stellar cast. We had John Goodman, Matt Dillon, Liv Tyler, Richard Jenkins. Just one amazing person after another jumped on that, and it was this really small, darkish comedy. It was just fun to make, and that was the first directorial movie I made in the States.
So Michael Douglas reached out to you, like with the script based on the commercials?
Yes, he had seen the commercials. That was how it worked. I had that show reel floating around town. We had something at Fox. We met basically everybody, and then and I think Spielberg just wanted a general meeting. But I remember him saying, "Those are the funniest commercials I've ever seen in my whole life," and sort of the same thing that Michael Douglas said, because there were little stories. There were 40-second beginning, middle, and an end. And Michael had seen the commercials, and he loved the tonality of it, and that's how it basically happened.
That was a very different character for him. If you think about like Michael Douglas roles, you don't see him play like I don't even know how to put it. He's like kind of like a sleazy guy. He got the shirt buttoned down, like he has like a little fro, like a little pompadour kind of haircut.
Yeah,
just the way he's talking to Dylan. Yeah, just the way he's talking to Matt Dillon about, hey, did you schlep her? Or whatever some of the words he was saying.
Yeah. And he does that, I mean, he had a ball doing that. It was funny because, the producers, he was a producer, but there were other producers too. And we were always sort of, he was the last guy that we cast. We had all the other people cast, and we were always like, okay, so who's going to play the hitman? And we're like, okay. And then eventually, and he never committed. And I just wanted him to do it because, I thought he would be fantastic with that hair piece. And I just wanted to make him look very, very different. So we started to sit around and go, okay, so what's Dustin Hoffman doing these days? And, we just started having those kinds of conversations around the office. And then one day he came, hey, guys, I want to play that part. We're like, oh, okay, cool. So we had to sort of lure him in a little bit. But no, he was
Yeah.
amazing. I remember the first day he was on set and he was in character and he just looked fantastic. I just remember he's saying, because he was both a producer and an actor, and there was the first AD, and people were saying, we got a little behind, blah, blah, blah. And he just said, guys, we're shooting a movie, not a schedule. And I remember to this day, that's been the wisest words that I've ever heard from him. We're shooting a movie, not a schedule. Because the director, you have to, you run behind because you need to get something good, and then you catch up again. And even if you change your mind or you move the schedule around, it's not about the schedule, it's about the movie. So sometimes some people on the other side have a hard time understanding that sometimes.
Yeah. The business side, like you always hear that whenever you watch like behind the scene documentaries, like when you hear the way, because sometimes the people that they have sitting on set aren't even like quote unquote in the movie business. They're more like there to crunch the numbers, be like, okay, we've been filming for 9 hours, you're supposed to be at 8 or something. Like you hear that so many times in any of those behind the scene documentaries, but that's really cool. What a great movie. I rewatched that for the first time in a few years. It is still so good. Like you said, Richard Jenkins, another guy that, God, everything he shows up in, he's just so good. And I don't even know how far in. I know he acted for a long time, but I don't know if this is the point that he became that guy that everybody needed in movies. Because in the 2000s, he was in so many big comedies, like when he was in Step Brothers playing the dad. He's just so good.
Yeah, I remember. I think our biggest surprise for that movie was, Andrew Dice Clay, which was which was a fun addition. He was amazing, and I can't remember where he was in his career at that point, but we were invited to see his stand-ups, and it was just fantastic. But he was sort of our biggest surprise cast in that movie.
Yeah,
and then we have Reba McEntire, who I just saw on television yesterday. She doesn't look a day older. Those amazing people. Paul Reiser.
Yeah, Paul Reiser is a total, like you mentioned, like Paul Reiser is such a nice guy in a lot of roles, but then you think Aliens, like you mentioned, one of your him in that movie is like the biggest a-hole, like what he's gonna do. Like his grand plan when you rewatch that movie and really hear that he was gonna have the aliens basically like impregnate both of them, like Sigourney and Newt, and you're like, oh my god. And then in this movie he's a total creep. And even with Reba, like that scene when he's like, I just feel it. Women are attracted to me. I felt it. I felt it when I came in here. You were looking at me.
Yeah. And I remember talking to him because it was written a bit like a joke in the script. And Paul and I were just sitting there thinking, maybe it's even funnier if it's not even a joke to him. It is a genuine problem in his head that women are just attracted to him. And they played it that way. And it was even funnier, I remember. Yeah, we had a good time.
Oh man! So then, just like directing, it's such an involved process because you're involved in everything, the day in day out. So then from there, like it just keeps going. Agent Cody Banks, a few years later.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think the people ask me sometimes what's the hardest thing in the movie business, and I think the hardest thing, for me at least, is the choice you make. What's the next movie you're making? And sometimes you can do good choices. Sometimes I've passed on movies that I want to just kill myself for having passed on, and then there are movies that you're happy that you passed on. You just never know. And suddenly before you know it, years can go by, and we were always doing commercials continuously. So it's
really?
Not like
okay.
we weren't. Oh yeah. That's been our continuous business. It's otherwise we wouldn't have been able to sustain ourselves between the movies. So I don't know. I do a 1 or 2 commercials a month all over the world. And sometimes we just take longer breaks, but it's the commercials that are bread and butter, to put it that way. So then you can hang around and wait for the right project. But then Agent Cody Banks came along, and I just loved that whole CIA world. I just adored this idea that the kid could use the CIA to do his home chores. It was just so many fun ideas in it. So Cody Banks, it's just been a good steady roll of movies. And then, when we went back home, we I don't know if you know about the Long Flat Balls franchise we did.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's yeah, it's a. I mean that was a summer. I did a commercial for the Norwegian telephone company. It was a good friend of mine. He was a creative on it, and the idea was that there was supposed to be 6 guys with Norway on their chest, and because the guy who had the R didn't have the right cell phone connection, when they cheered, it said "no way" because the R was lost. And then we're shooting this commercial. I mean, I'll send you the link, and you can show it on the here if you want. And then we were shooting the commercial. I was thinking, oh, hold on, what if the Y goes looking for the R, and then the R shows up, and then it said "no war." So these, yeah. And my only goal for this commercial was that I don't want any famous people. I don't want any actors, nothing. I just want it to be absolutely real people. So we found guys on the street. I just said, "Oh, you got a big belly. You got a space for a belly. Come on." So these guys have never been in front of the camera before. And that commercial, because of the message of the no war, I think there was some unrest in the world at the time. It became massive. It was those days going viral, So suddenly these guys are massive stars. They're signing autographs. They're opening malls. And that's when, we, my wife and I, and the writer and a few other people said, why don't we just make a feature? And we were like, well, none of them ever acted before. And it's funny because this comedy turned into be the biggest hit that year. It was the full Monty, just with more laughs. And it was the biggest hit. It blew 3 times as much as any other Norwegian movie made that year. And so then we made the sequel 2 years later. That was an even bigger hit. And people sometimes say back home, they say, well, you're a commercial guy. And I say, there was nothing commercial about that idea. There were 6 guys who had never been in front of the camera. I had a writer who had only written commercials, never a feature. We financed it ourselves. It was nothing commercial about that idea. It was the riskiest project you could possibly do. And still we did it, and it just ended up being commercial, but it wasn't a commercial movie. It was a totally indie project. So Long Flat Balls was sort of a summer gig for us. So we just did that in between everything else. So, but that's been, and now Long Flat Balls 3 is our latest release, and it's now doing festivals. Yeah, and it did really well, and it's a super fun movie. Very proud
That's
of
your
it.
moment of like you said earlier, you wish you could try those extra shots. Like
Yes.
You said, some other actors. This is kind of like that in a way because it was like a happy accident. You felt something on set. You improv'd a little bit by changing it around and having the Y and that's pretty great. And it turned into that.
Yeah, and then and also what's fascinating is that these guys are not actors. They're just supernatural talented. If you see the movie, you'll see that there's emotional scenes, there's funny scenes, comedy, timing, everything. And shooting that movie, that was thankfully done digital. The first one was even shot on HD because that was a moment when I just had to let the camera roll because these guys have never acted before. So, I just do it again and again and again. And then suddenly there's an happy accident. I'm like, oh my God, that's just genius the way he said that. So I had to change the thing that happened before and after to preserve that. But so those movies have this lightning in a bottle sense. They're just so spontaneous and real. So yes, that was the best use of digital filmmaking ever because I could never have done that with changing the roll of film and never.
So you're saying you do 1 to 2 commercials a year? Did you do any of the Super Bowl?
No, a month.
This year? A month?
No, not yeah. I travel all the time.
Wow.
Yes, I do them.
Nice.
We take a break, but I can do 2-3 commercials per month, and then I go England, Norway, Middle East, wherever. I haven't done Super Bowl this year. No, I've been fortunate to do a Super Bowl some years ago, but it's been a while now since the Super Bowl commercial.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah.
It's cool because you're making these little films. You're like you said.
Yes.
And I think that's what Michael Douglas saw and Spielberg saw. Like you're able to tell a story in 40 to 60 seconds. It's pretty amazing when you watch a commercial and it's like memorable, or the next day you're talking about it at the water cooler.
Yeah. Yes. It's actually a really, really great format for filmmakers, because you have to be so sharp in order to get all what the clients wants to communicate. I did all the, I don't know if you know these Capital One commercials with all the Vikings that do crazy
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
I did all of those.
Nice.
And those were all super sharp on timing. And, you have basically, those were 30 seconds, I think. And they were all physical humor. So it had to be timed perfectly. And also doing commercials, first of all, you get to travel around the world. I don't know. I've been basically everywhere. And you meet great people. You always have great crew because you get the best of the best. And you get to try new shit out. The DP comes, or some stunt man comes, and he says, well, I just did this on that movie. You go, oh, well, let's try that on this. So you're always on the cutting edge of technology, and that's really helpful.
Yeah. Wow. And then from those, the Agent Cody Banks, you have those Happy Accident that turned into 3 movies, but 2 back to back. And then one movie that is so good, the Pink Panther 2.
Oh, right.
Cast in that movie. And so, you know what's crazy when you rewatch a movie after a long time? Like, I don't go there and like look and see everybody's who's in it, but I was watching it last week, and it's like, he's in that? Like, Jean Reno's in this?
Yes.
Alfred Molina? Yep. And you have him in all these different types of roles. It's great.
Yeah, that was another one of those amazingly cast, just being so lucky, because I've been a lifelong fan of John Cleese, and to sit between takes and just pick his brain about when he was in Monty Python, and it's just legendary. And you're working with these amazing names, like Steve Martin himself was just so gracious and just so polite and nice. So that was just a really awesome project. I remember showing the movie for the first time to Steve Martin, and he was sitting there watching, and I had done my utmost of making it cinematic. I wanted to have emotional moments. I wanted, camera to move. I wanted a lot of the comedy to be within the timing, not within the editing, but just actually. And I think he really liked it. And I looked at his notepad afterwards. There was 0 notes. He just had the date.
Wow.
Yes. I tore that piece of paper away and I framed it, because it was Steve Martin's notes after the first cut of Pink Panther, and there was nothing. And he just said, wow, it feels like a movie, because it was a little bit of a sketchy type thing, right? It was a lot of jokes. And I think I just managed to make it a little more into a movie. And he was really happy with that.
When you have to be serious on set, but there's obviously a lot of funny scenes in that movie. How do you not like lose it when John Cleese starts banging his head on the bathroom wall?
Yeah, that's it's compare Pink Panther to Long Flat Balls. When you work with John Cleese and Steve Martin, they rehearse, they know exactly what they're doing. It's really funny stuff, but a lot of it has been rehearsed, and you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you've already laughed. It's funny as hell, but you're more in sort of
you got it out already. Yeah.
Yeah, but on Long Flat Balls, I had that every single day. Because these guys forgot their lines, or they were stepping on each other, or they looked in a different. I mean, That's a place where the sound guy had to clean up all my laughter from behind the monitor. So that was a different matter. But on Pink Panther, it was a lot more controlled and planned, to put it that way.
No, it's funny when you think about it. Like, obviously, I don't know if you would know this or not. I'm sure the internet has it. But for like when they made the first Pink Panther with Steve Martin, I wonder if like he was probably I couldn't see anybody else ever play that role. Like, it's hard to
I agree.
Think of anyone.
Yes, and I think now you might think that sort of comedy is a little dated, but I thought that was a terrific movie. Sean Levy directed that, and then he sort of gave me the relay stick. We had wonderful conversation before I went on did my movie, and he was a producer on my movie, and I think he did a terrific job. It's a risky job because it's a big franchise that a lot of people love the original Pink Panther, and some people can't get over the fact that the original Pink Panther was so much better. But I think Steve Martin just knocked it out of the park.
No, yeah, no, so good. So good. No, that's so cool. Like when I get like revisiting these movies, like when I'm getting ready to talk to somebody as wonderful as yourself, and it's like so cool to be able to check these out. And then right from there, you roll right into, obviously you're doing the commercials 1 or 2 a month, but the Karate Kid, another cool, like such a great like remake of a movie. You had the other one. There was really nothing with Karate Kid until obviously the last few years with Cobra Kai. So it's really cool to be able to see that movie come out, because then you had a younger audience that might be like 10 to 15. They discover that, they discover the old ones, but Jackie Chan in that role.
Yeah, it was. I was very lucky. Again, one of those things. I think I have it somewhere. I can't remember. It was a movie that I had to really fight for. I really wanted it, and I wasn't a sports movie kind of guy. I had never done a sports movie. Well, I'd done Long Flat Boats, but that wasn't about sports. That was about the soccer fans. But so I didn't have that sort of thing where there's a whole genre of American movies where there's a sports movie and they win in the end type of thing with the audience. I'd never done anything like that, and I remember I think I was competing with another guy who had a lot of sports movies, and I got higher and higher up in the because it's like you meet that one, you go higher and higher up in the executive chain, and then eventually you're either hired or you're not. And I remember my wife and I, Vesh and I, were sitting there talking, how are we gonna break the back of this? How can I be different than how the other guys did? And I want to show you this, because what we did then, we're really proud of that. We decided that the heart of the movie was where Jackie Chan lived, his home. And I knew also that Amy Pascal at Sony was really into tangible filmmaker stuff. She liked to see filmmakers just work on real stuff. So we decided to build a model of Jackie Chan's house. Yes, here it is. And we built this. So this is my wife working on the model in the kitchen.
Wow.
And we had to do it after the kids had gone to bed because they wanted to play with it, and ended up being this thing.
That's awesome.
And then I could take a lot of pictures of it with, at night with the car, that one lamp. And that's how I came up with that idea of the shadow theater on the wall. So that all happened with working on the model. And I remember going into the office of Amy Pascal at Sony. I had this big model, and I spoke to the front office, and they said, yeah, she's running late. And I was sitting there nervous as hell. I had everything worked out in my mind. And then I heard, well, she only has 15 minutes. And I said, oh, damn. My whole pitch was more than 15 minutes. So I walked into her office with the model, and I turned on the little battery lights, and I switched off the lights in her office, because that was by the door. And I walked in with this little model lit up. And I just remember it was like this iconic Hollywood moment where she just lifted up the phone and said, cancel my next meeting. And it was just, and yes, it really happened. And I could show her with a flashlight, and I could talk about, because that was the heart of the movie. It was the Jackie and Jaden in this little courtyard. It wasn't about sports and winning, and it was about them, the two of them. And I think that kind of convinced her. And I remember that was one of those where I was working on something else. I think maybe I had a commercial. I had to fly back to Europe, and I flew back, and I landed in Paris. I just got the call. Will wants to meet you, which is sort of the last. Then you're all the way at the top. I just went straight back on another plane, flew straight back, and then just walked up to him with the model, up to his house, and yeah. So I think that was the most amazing for both my wife and I. We spent a lot of time in China, which is and working with the Smiths, and that was just amazing. The whole thing was just amazing.
That's a true Hollywood story. Cancel my meeting.
Yes.
That is something.
Yes,
that's like
exactly.
something from a movie that's written. So here's a quick question, because I never asked the director that I interviewed, and you just brought up a great point. So when you go in for like you mentioned for this movie, but do they like give you the script, or are you going in there like, what are you pitching? Your vision of like, are you bringing storyboards, or like how does that work when you go into a pitch meeting to get the job?
I mean, there's as many answers to that as there are people, and I think it's interesting on your show here to ask that kind of thing, because we can talk about our movies and we have a lot of anecdotes and fun things, but that part of the job is something that you don't know much about, is the actual pitching and how you get your job, which is really hard. Unless you're Chris Nolan or Steven Spielberg, you just pick your movies. Yeah. Us normal people still have to fight for the movies, right? So that is that's something that a lot of people should know about. And you get sent a script and you read it, you love it, you call your agent, say, I want to throw my hat in the ring, and then you just start working on a pitch. And there are elaborate pitches. I know the guy who did Tron. His name escapes me now. He's an amazing director. He just did Top Gun, I think. Remember that? He went off and pulled a lot of favors from post houses, and he pre-visualized the whole Tron bike sequence, right? Which convinced him. I've heard people do all kinds of crazy things. So this model thing was something that we just felt this is the way to show how there's no real solution to it. The only thing you have to remember is you have to somehow make them feel something, so either you play music or you make them laugh, or you do whatever you can. I mean, after a pitch, I am completely exhausted. I am drained as if I had the biggest exam, and you have to do this 5 or 10 times, and you have to remember that you go in with a young executive. And then if he says, yeah, you should meet this guy, then you go into the next level. The same young executive is there, right? So you have to bring something new. So every time you have to bring something new. So the guys who've heard your pitch 4 or 5 times already aren't getting bored at that point, because they're sitting around debating. So you always have to bring something new. So I think that's just make them feel something. I mean, we're working on a musical now, and our secret weapon are the 2 composers who we drag in. We fly them wherever we need to meet somebody. We bring a grand, electric piano, and we say, okay, before you say anything, here's the music. And they sing a private concert, and people get emotional. And then you go, okay, now we can talk about the movie. I've heard people drag gospel choirs into the meeting room. You just, whatever it takes to either separate yourself and make them feel something. Just don't walk in with a script on your arm and go, well, act 2, act break. I think that never works. They'll be bored quickly.
No, that's true. Man, I can't believe it. Yeah, especially that if the same executives are moving up with each meeting, it's like being a comedian and you have to like come up with a new act like every time. That's got to be difficult.
Yeah, it's exhausting. But, they really want to make sure they have the right guy. And it's funny, sometimes you do a pitch and you think you didn't really nail it, and you didn't really nail it because you weren't exactly right for the movie. That's sometimes true too. You think you want it, but you're maybe not right. Somebody else were more right. So you got to live with that.
Do you still have the model of the house?
It's in a museum. Actually, my small town Fredrikstad has a movie theater named after me, and they have a huge. That's
awesome.
Yes, it's amazing, and they have a huge display of every prop from every movie I ever made. So they're taking care of all that stuff. They have. Yes, you can go to Fredrikstad and see the model.
I'm gonna have to go there. Right, what do they have from One Night in McCool's?
They have
Michael Douglas's hair.
Yeah, Michael Douglas's tracksuit jacket. Liv Tyler's dress. Yep, that's all there. Yeah, Steve Martin's hat, his little gadgets, all that stuff is there.
What was it like? That must have been that must have been pretty emotional when they reached out to you and said, "Hey, I want to." They reached out to you and said, "Hey, we want to name a movie theater after you."
Yes, it was. That was a big day for me. I think that happened around
Wow.
Karate Kid, and I mean, it's not the whole theater because that's just called Fredrikstad Movie Theater, but it's one of
Yeah.
it's the biggest theater in there. Yeah, I mean, they're amazing. The guy who runs that theater now, called Jørgen Jansen, he has done the most amazing premieres. I remember we had the Karate Kid premiere in Fredrikstad, and
No.
because I don't go to Oslo. That's the capital of Norway. I don't want to go there. I take it down to Fredrikstad, which is an hour. It's a small town. I bring everybody there, and we managed to get Will Smith, Jackie Chan, Jada was there. We were there. We managed to get those guys to Fredrikstad because we had a big meeting at Sony when we were talking about the world tour. It was Japan, Paris. And then I said to Will, we got to go to, and I think Stockholm was on the list. And I said to Will, we should go to Fredrikstad. And he was like, yeah, we should, because he got it. He gets that idea of bringing something back to your hometown, and Jackie too. So we had a tour list that said London, Paris, Fredrikstad, Tokyo. It was the craziest thing. And it was, and when you do something like that in a small town, they have the longest red carpet in Northern Europe, and I think there were 6,000 people showing up. And I
Wow.
remember the next day, it was the craziest premiere, and I know to this day they still talk about it. And we went to Paris the next day, which was a smaller event. And I remember Jaden said to me that Fredrikstad was so much better. So it was just, I mean, you can look it up, Fredrikstad Karate Kid premiere, and you just see it's like
Yeah.
Beatlemania. It was the most amazing moment. And I was just so gracious of both Jackie and Jaden and Jada and Will. They took their time. They flew there. They drove the car down. It was just such an honor. It was amazing.
Yeah. Was that the first? Before that, did you go back at all ever? Or
Yeah. No, I did.
oh, you
I've
did.
done
Okay.
every premiere there. Yeah, this was like
Oh,
the fifth
cool.
in the. Oh yeah. So now it's a big
Nice.
tradition now. It's we were just there with long flat bolts, and we had Samantha Fox is in our movie. She was there. It's always a big spectacle when we have premieres there, and everybody knows it too.
I love that. That's so cool. I love the way you said it. It was like thinking of like a Rolling Stones concert, like London, Tokyo, Fredrikstad.
Fredrikstad.
Where's
Yes.
where's that?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it
That's a
was a
cool
fun tour
tradition.
plan.
When did you think about doing that? You did that for one night in McCool's, and then just kept it
Yeah.
rolling. That's awesome.
Yeah, we started with Hamilton. That was the first time, and then
Oh, okay.
Peter Stormare, who was in that movie, came,
Oh, he's
and that's
great.
the first time. Yes, he's amazing. And that's the first time they started cement. So we have cement prints. So they have their own Walk of Fame there with Jackie Chan and Peter Stormare, and so it's a real celebrity wall of some big names. So they've kept that tradition up. And yeah, I've done it on every single movie.
That's great. So you said you're working on trying to get a musical now. Is there any other genres you'd like to do?
Well, music. I've always loved musicals, and this one is a really great story, and it's going to be a little bit more of a. It's not a musical with dance numbers as such. It's more sort of the Les Mis version of it, where they go seamlessly in and out of songs. But for me, it's never been about genre. I want to make a sci-fi movie. I want to make a Western. It's not about genre. I've just always liked movies.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking. There was this famous classical pianist in Norway called Wolfgang Plugge. He's an amazing talent, and there was some smart ass journalists from a sort of really cool newspaper. And during the Grammys of Norway, they thought, hey, why don't we have this classical piano player hand out the Country and Western Award just to sort of mess with him, to say, oh, aren't we cool? Aren't we crazy? We put the classical music guy delivering the Western thing, the Country and Western thing. And then they interviewed him afterwards. They said, "So, how was it for you to hand out the country and western award?" And he was like, I don't separate genre. I just separate good and bad music. And they were like, they had no answer, which I thought was such an amazing answer.
Yeah.
We don't make genres. We make good or bad movies, whether it's a love story or for kids or whatever. It's not a genre. We don't make genres. We make movies.
That's a good answer.
Well, that was how I feel.
Yeah. Oh man, this is great. A couple questions I always like to ask people. With you, it's a little bit different because you're always doing filmmaking. Was there any other career path you ever thought about along the way, or was it just tunnel vision? This is the only thing I'm going to do.
Well, I was always dreaming of being a rock star.
Yeah.
Which is the dumbest kid idea ever. I played music. I had a band when I was in Holland. I had a band, and I was, I went so Sting. I was like, oh God, that has to be the coolest thing anybody can ever do. I was like, okay. So I had film sort of as a fallback plan, but I had to do something to make a living. So I was happy I had film because I was not a good rock and roll musician.
What'd you play, or did you sing?
No, I play. Yeah, I sing. All that stuff you try as a young man. I played the bass at that time. We were a good band. Now we had some tiny gigs here and there, but it was never going to be anything more than that. So
good thing you had film to fall back on.
Yeah, fall back on something safe. Safe career choice.
I know you mentioned like the Steve Martin, the note with just the date that you kept and framed, and then everything that's in the theater in Fredrikstad. But was there any other mementos or keepsakes that you keep after films, like a shooting script or any type of person's wardrobe that you have over the years?
Yeah, I mean, the wardrobe things and gadgets like that we put in that museum, but you always end up with a clapper, front of the clapper, and that's always
cool.
A gift from the camera department. And then, I kept the shooting scripts because there's a lot of fun notes and little things in that. But funny enough, they just end up in the shelf. I never go back and look at it.
Yeah.
I know I have it, but it's funny when you've done a movie, you're so done with it. It's like, if one of my movies are on television or something, I can't watch it. It's like,
you can't.
No, I've seen it so many times. I think maybe now I don't know. No, I don't think so. I think one of my proudest movies is The 12th Man, which I think is still to this day showing me most as a filmmaker. That one I think has a poetry and an emotional. That one I guess I could see again because I think the visuals are so amazing. And Long Flat Balls 3, I've seen, I don't know how many times I've seen now, because, when people laugh, it's always a kick. We're going to show it in Sedona, the film festival, in a week or two. And it's just always a joy when there's comedies, you get people laughing. But if something comes on television, I can't watch it. I'm so done with them.
Because you've seen it so many times. And then also, sometimes I talk to people like actors, and they're like, I don't like to see myself because since then, I'm so much better as an actor, and I know that I'll be like, oh crap. Or they'll say, oh, why did they use that take? That's what actors say a lot. Well, they're like, oh man, I had a better take than that.
Yeah. There are moments when I think that timing of that edit didn't work. I wish I could go back. I have that, but I think it's more the thing that when you've done something that you've done it takes so much energy to do a movie. It's like you've born something. It's you've sweated. It's gone from your system, right? It belongs to somebody else. It doesn't belong to me anymore. It's hard to explain. It's just somebody else can watch it. Life's too short. There's
I know.
There's too many movies to watch. I want to see other people's movies, not my own.
And well, that, and then also you're thinking about each month, 1 or 2 commercials or the next movie you're working on. So it's hard probably to like watch that because maybe your mind will go into remembering all that, every shot. I'm sure if you watch any scene of any of your movies, you have like this memory that it's like, oh, I remember exactly what take this was and things like that. Because directors have to have a certain memory to do it, I think.
Yeah, I mean that fades away. It's when I go into the editing room, I can sometimes, I remember take 3 of that take. Even though you've done thousands of shots, I remember which one was the good one. But that's just too much data to keep. So after a while, that just fades away. And now, luckily, I can watch a movie or one of my own movies, and it's just a movie. I can remember if I really sit down, but I've forgotten a lot of it too.
Yeah. I mean, Harald, this has been great. I'm so happy we connected. This is a lot of fun. This will be out in a couple weeks. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll shoot you an email, and then I'll look for, if you want to send me that commercial. If not, I'm sure it's on YouTube. I'll be able to find it. But you can just email me that.
Yeah, I can send you some information on. Yes, I'll send you some of that.
Totally.
Yes.
Awesome, man. And there's any photos that you prefer of yourself? Because I usually just go on IMDb and find a photo of someone just to put like on my website, and then when people go on on podcast apps, so it'll show like your face when they go to the interview. But people are really gonna like this one, man. I'm really happy that you mentioned that the director interviews, because I don't know why I never thought of that, because I'm sure the directors that I've interviewed went through that process. But maybe they just never mentioned. The way you said that really like flipped the switch, made me think like, obviously directors are the same as everybody else. Like camera operators have to interview, gaffers, everybody has to do that. So cool. Yeah,
it's a tough part of the business. But thank you for doing all the research. I love it. It was really good that you knew so much about the movies and
Oh, no problem, man.
So
I'm happy that
I'll send you.
Yeah, totally.
I'll just send you the link to, I have our company has a website. You can see those Capital One commercials. You can link it up. You can
sweet.
Link to my Instagram, whatever you want. Fun to get something out of that. Great. Thank you so much for your research. Great questions. Loved it. I hope I didn't talk too much.
Oh, no, I loved it. That's the best, man. All right, Harald, have a great night.
Thank you so much.